Hey mate, I know someone who can notice a 200 nanosecond difference in CPU speeds. That's nothing, mate. I've got a friend who can notice a 100 nanosecond difference in speeds. What CPU is he using? Well, 10th gen, of course. PC gaming. It seems wherever I go nowadays and I talk about a PC, I can't escape everyone talking about a gaming PC, except in today's video where we're going with a different kind of PC, and it is going to be the Snap PC, where the idea is to have the most responsive PC if you want to do your work or you want to open things up and just use Windows with the quickest response times, and also, of course, do some good casual gaming, then this PC is going to deliver. However, it's also special for one more reason, and that is it's going to be my new main PC for everything. So today is going to be a bit of a journey where we're going to take you guys through how this PC got built, how much it costs, and everything involved in setting it up. So if you want to build something similar and you want the snappiest PC on the internet, then this video is definitely going to help you out. So let's get right into it just after this quick sponsor spot.
Never pay full price for Windows 10 or 11 again. With today's video sponsor, SCD Keys, you can get activated for as little as $15 using that coupon BFTYC. Links in description below.
Today I am changing my main PC drastically, and by drastically I mean there's going to be two major changes here. The first of which you're seeing in the frame is we're changing from NVIDIA GPU to an AMD GPU. This is the 7900 XTX. And the reason I'm doing this is because recently you guys were really liking the content that I did surrounding 10th gen, and why we'll get onto the next upgrade soon, why I'm going from 13th gen back to 10th gen. You guys really like that. You just wanted to have more experience-based reviews and opinions coming out here on the channel. So I thought while we're making that change, I might as well change over to an AMD GPU in my main system. And the biggest reason for this is I just want to try it, give AMD a chance. I haven't done this in a while, and so I feel like especially in the last 6 months, AMD have made some, I've noticed personally in all the testing I've done in the GPUs, when I've done the reviews for them, I've noticed the driver stability is actually coming a long way with AMD, and also the performance for the money is, especially on the flagship, is really good with this GPU right here. So I'm willing to put it in my main rig and I'll take it through the paces, and then I'll update you guys what it's been like with a video in the future editing with the AMD GPU in my main system. So let's begin that experiment here today. But what we've got right here now is in this mini ITX rig, we've got a delidded CPU. This is the i9-10850K. And if you're wondering why I'm going with this CPU, it's because recent videos we did where I had problems with 13th gen in the form of just random desktop usage, especially on a heavily loaded desktop. It was stuttering, and I wasn't used to this when I used the 10th gen CPU in the past. So we're going back to that, and I've already tested the 10th gen CPU as well, and things are a lot smoother and snappier when I'm editing videos. However, what you're seeing here right now is a half delidded CPU. We've got the lid off, and I'm not going to show you guys footage of that because I do not recommend doing this method here, where I accidentally ordered a X299 kit, and so I had to improvise here with VESA mounting screws, and it was just really bad. Like in general, I don't recommend someone doing it, and it actually worked out fine though. But if you're going to do this, do get the proper kit that's made for 1150X CPUs. However, what we're left with now is stim. So we are going to get the stim off this CPU, which is actually really tedious. The best method, last time I did it, I didn't do this method, but the best method people said is just to actually use your liquid metal and put it on the CPU, and that'll take the remnants off if you leave the gallium on there. I'm gonna let that sit and then we'll get back into it. But in the meantime, we've got here the Z490 motherboard from ASRock. This is their TB3 model. This particular motherboard, I've used this in the past. It is amazing. The VRM temperatures are really low, but also the NVMe SSD port is connected to the VRM heatsink, And since the efficiency of the VRM itself, I do believe from my testing, this is one of, if not the best in terms of efficiency, meaning for the clock speeds and the power consumption being used by the CPU, this motherboard transfers as much of that power as possible, essentially leaking very little power to the heatsink itself. So great VRM installed on this motherboard. And then for the DDR4, we're going with 4000 megahertz CL18. This is a V-Colo kit. I believe it's Hynix C-Die, which essentially is known as sort of like the value, sort of good speeds DDR4 memory on the scene. Though for the final parts here, we've got the PC Cooler i100. Now, this is the case that I got off AliExpress. It's under 8 liters. Well, they've actually updated it to be slightly bigger from the original, and they've made some really good changes. The first being you've got metal mesh sides instead of acrylic sides. The second being the handle on the top is now bigger. Even though the handle was really good on the OG model, I think this will be a little bit better too. And then on the front here, they've changed the front IO to the side here, and they've updated the power button as well as providing USB Type-C as well. So very welcome additions on this case, and it looks better and feature-wise. And then for the power supply, we've got here a power supply that I picked up on a bargain. It was going on sale. It's the Fractal Design 650G. It's SFXL, so it's slightly bigger than SFX, but this case will fit SFXL anyhow, so that's not a problem. It's got those flexible short cables, which is going to be very much needed in this build. And if you're wondering if 650 watts is going to be enough, we'll talk about that later, especially after we've done some undervolting. Then for the SSD, we're going with 2 terabyte Gen 4 SSD from Hain. I've tested the speeds out on this thing. It's actually a blazingly fast SSD, and it'll work absolutely fine on Gen 3 anyhow. Then for the CPU cooler, we'll talk about that later, because it's actually a really different proposition I've got going on for this build. And now we've finished cleaning off the stim. We are relatively flat, except there's just a little bit of stim still left over there. So I'm just gonna actually do one more round now, just because I want this to be perfectly flat. So this PC is now completo, el dito, and for you guys out there, that's Spanish for it's complete. And also for the German, I speak a little bit of German. PC, ja, ja. And that's all there is to that one. But you may be wondering what the ja is going on with this cooler attached to this rig in this manner. This PC was looking great, and then I've gone and slapped a 420mm cooler on this ITX system. And the reason for that is, there's actually a reason for that. How I work with my configuration is just what works best for me. And so I found that I like to have my CPU temps as cool as possible in that respect. And so an air cooler is just not going to cut it at this size. I would need a bigger air cooler. I've tried the air coolers in the past. The best one was the knocked to a L9, I think it was, or the L12. It was like a low profile one. That did okay, but it limited me to around 140-ish watts. This will allow me to go up to around easily over 200 watts, but at the same time, it's just gonna be whisper quiet. And what I found when I was traveling with this mini ITX rig was that I can just disconnect the CPU cooler very quickly, either put it in my suitcase, and then I can keep the rig just for carrying on all the important parts with me on the plane, because I'd definitely not put this rig in a suitcase, especially if it's my main work editing PC, because it just gets smashed in the suitcase. And actually my Timberland suitcase in Taiwan got cracked. It almost got destroyed, and that's a heavy duty suitcase. So I was really surprised by the beating that thing took. But anyway, that aside, what we're doing here is we're just attaching, disconnecting the CPU cooler when we need it. If I'm traveling locally within Japan, say to my friend's house, we want to play some games, I'll just grab the handle and the water cooler at the same time and just chuck it in the car and go over there. So in terms of portability, it's still got the portability as this small form factor. But one thing I'll say is so far, this Radeon 7900 XTX fits really well in this build. It's like they designed this GPU to have that amount of power in it for this small form factor case. So that was my biggest critiquing point with the RTX 4000 series. I would have loved to have seen, especially like a 4080 or even a 4070 Ti in this smaller two slot form factor. I think there is one 2-slot out there called a 4070 Ti Inno 3D XT or something. But the problem is when I researched it, apparently the middle fan was blowing off. And I got to laugh here because I've never heard of this before. It was just blowing off the actual cooler, and then that was it. And apparently some of the retailers were refusing to warranty it after a couple of months. And I've never heard of something so bizarre with GPUs before. So that one turned me off going with a 4070 Ti to begin with, because it was the only cooler and profile that would fit in this small case like this, and I could put the side panel back on. Anyhow, the build's looking really good so far, but we still have to do a lot of tuning because I don't want this thing to just be fast. I want it to be snappy, the snappiest thing I've ever snapped on in my life. So we're gonna get onto some snap tuning right now. So we're now in the BIOS here, and our 4000 megahertz memory locks in absolutely fine on these XMP profiles. Now, I've tried doing a bit of tuning with this DRAM, and what I'm finding here is that they've pretty much, V-Color have maxed this Hynix C-Die stuff out to the brim here. This is a 64 gigabyte kit, by the way, which is extremely difficult to well, I shouldn't say extremely difficult. It's much more harder to tune than, say, 32 gigabytes or especially 16 gigabytes. So they've got here a 4000 megahertz XMP profile that I cannot tune anything lower. I cannot get 17, for instance, 21. I've tried locking those in. So they've maxed this XMP profile out pretty much as high as it can go. But let's have a look here as well. The D-lid. This is the beautiful thing about the D-lid. It's dropped the temperatures down. When I was testing this before in the previous videos, this would go up to around 42 degrees on the BIOS screen here. Same ambient temperatures with the same motherboard temperatures. And so the good thing is that D-lid is working, and it's actually working pretty well. So I'm very happy with those results already. Even though we've got the Arctic cooler on, it is better. This is still those idle temperatures, and we're seeing a 6-degree difference there. So can't wait to get into the Windows and start just blasting that thing and seeing how it goes. Now, for a basic quick tune on the voltage, we will go with an offset mode here and just quickly minus 50 millivolts on the CPU, because I usually find you can get away with that straight away, and hopefully that will work absolutely fine. So we're gonna save this with, at the moment, just like a base, and then we are going to go into, and you probably saw the profiles there. That was just a lot of different things. And we're gonna go into install Windows right now and start tuning Windows up, which there's a few little things I like to do to make my Windows really snappy. So up until this point in time on this video, I've been editing this video out before filming this outro because I wanted to test out this PC, not just in games, which we'll get onto in a moment, but I wanted to test it out for the main purpose I built it for. And that was editing videos, where the performance is just blowing me away already. This is a night and day difference compared to that 13th gen that I was editing on before. The snappiness of this system is just insanely good, where I'm having no hiccups whatsoever while I'm doing my work, which is how I used to remember editing videos up until I then jumped on 12th gen. I had some issues, and like I said in my previous video, I initially thought I was just 32 gigabytes of RAM. But then I went to 13th gen, 3900K with 64 gigabytes of RAM. Issue was still there. And so what we found out during Computex is that there's a problem with the input-output on the new 12th and 13th gen CPUs. At least that's what I was told. And from my testing, that's what I'm starting to see when you're doing a lot of different operations that are heavy in Windows 10 or 11. And so this, the 10th gen CPU just doesn't have any of those problems whatsoever. The video editing experience here has just been absolutely smooth as butter. And the good thing is the AMD GPU is performing just as well as an NVIDIA GPU would perform, at least in this edit up until this point in time. Now, one thing I'll quickly complain about with the AMD GPU is that I'd like to see AMD update the drivers to make the macro keys without having to press any control. So you can just, for instance, if I want to start recording my desktop with Radeon Relive, I can just press F8 like I would on Shadowplay. So hopefully they change that and update that, and I can get my hotkeys sorted out where they're just faster and quicker to work with to get you guys the content. Other than that though, the GPU, I've undervolted it because out of the box it chews over 300 watts. So we drop it down a bit, up the memory speeds, and during games, during Dota 2 for example, we're juicing a little over 300 watts. Apex Legends does take this game, however, Apex Legends, however, at 34-inch ultra-wide, does take this whole system up to close to 500 watts. So it can start to cook things up if you're maxing out the GPU and the CPU as well. And in both games, even in the hardest of clutch situations, we're getting over 200 FPS. Apex gets close to 300 FPS most of the time. And then Dota 2 is just hovering over 200 FPS even in those intense multiplayer battles, which in a lot of testing I've done, if you benchmark at the start of Dota 2, you'll get 240 FPS easy, which is the cap in the game. But if you're benchmarking during a full multiplayer game, say for instance the whole stretch, getting close to 200 FPS or getting over this is a really good score. So the i9 10850K, or if you're going to go with the i9 10900K, it can game absolutely fine even with PCIe Gen 3 and the latest RX 7900 XTX or RTX 4080 or 4090. Though what about the overclocks? Because this is probably an important thing if you want the snappiest PC. And here's with the 10850K, the temperatures were really good. Even with 5.2 gigahertz, I couldn't get really anywhere close to 80 degrees, but at 5.1 gigahertz, which is what we settled on, we managed to get the temperatures around 75 degrees max, and that's with an AVX offset of 1. So if we're using, say, Cinebench R23, it'll go down to 5 gigahertz because that instruction set is quite intense on the CPU. So it's using a little bit more power. However, I also did one important thing, I believe, especially if you are editing videos in Premiere Pro, and that is I overclocked the internal graphics, the UHD 630 graphics. Gave that a 200 megahertz bump as well as a little bit more voltage because this program does use quick sync, and so if you can get that internal graphics up, that'll help as well, especially when you are browsing through your footage and using that Intel quick sync to do that. So everything altogether has been just tuned for absolute maximum snap performance while still shackling that GPU's power consumption so it doesn't get out of control. But another thing is too, when you undervolt the GPU, it's going to be absolutely whisper quiet even while I'm gaming. And speaking of that Arctic 420mm water cooler, that thing just doesn't miss a beat. I think you have to load this thing up to over 300 watts before you even hear the fans creep up. So that's really good about that RTX CPU cooler. And with all that out of the way, this PC is not your typical gaming PC. I'm going to be trying out the AMD GPU over the next month, like I said, and I'll make an update video on how the experience has gone. And hopefully we don't come into many bugs, because I'd actually love to stay on this GPU. So far, the video editing performance is great. The gaming is also really good, coupled in with this ultra wide monitor. And the size of this GPU, which is one thing I critiqued on pretty much all my higher end RTX 40 series reviews, is that those GPUs were too big. This size is really good, and it can fit in a lot of different custom builds, especially if they're really small, like the mini ITX one we did here today. Anyway, guys, if you have been watching the channel over the years, you'll know when I'm excited. It'll just come through on the camera, and this thing is, I'm excited about it, man. It's a snappy beast. Don't let anyone tell you that it's in your head and you're going crazy or anything like that, because it's real. The differences between these CPU architectures is real in favor of 10th gen if you're doing what I'm doing. And actually, a funny thing is, I just got messaged on a DM from a YouTube channel called Graphically Challenged, and he's saying that he was having problems dragging and dropping his files with his i9 13900K. So he's asking for advice, and I'm just saying, look, this is what I'm doing, and it's helping me out. It's night and day difference. So if you guys are interested in building something similar to this beast that we featured in today's video here, my new main PC, not just for gaming, but also for work, then I will put some links in the description below for you guys. And the good thing is, it came under 2K for a 4K 64 gigabyte equipped video editing PC. It's actually, the prices of everything is getting really good right now, not just on the low end or the mid range, but also on the high end, where these kinds of deals, if you can mix and match the right parts, you can really pick yourself up something that will absolutely smash it in terms of the snappiness. Though, if you guys have stayed this far and you're enjoying that Tech Yes content, then be sure to hit that like button for us. And also, do let us know in the comment section below what you think of everything that's gone down, especially in the last few videos. There is one massive can of worms that has been opened here, and I'm sure we are going to get more answers as time goes on. Though, do let us know in the comments. Love reading those thoughts and opinions. As always, just like this question of the day here, which comes from Mass1128. And they ask, but is it possible for Intel to fix latency issue with a software Windows update? Is Intel even aware of this? So I'm sure they're aware of it. They're the ones that made the CPU. Though in terms of fixing it with software and Windows updates and patches, from what I was told, it's a design flaw in the CPU. That's what I was told. And so you can't patch that up unless you introduce some sort of delay or latency somewhere. So I feel like there's a bottleneck. And once you start heavily loading the CPU up with different inputs and outputs, for instance, if you move a folder on your Windows desktop, that's different to moving your mouse in a game, because you're doing a 4K random write in that operation. There's also a 4K random read, because there's no way to predict that you're going to move your mouse there and grab that folder and then move it. So there's a lot going on when you're on your desktop as opposed to gaming, that just makes it so the input-output operation is so much different in terms of doing productivity and workstation stuff as opposed to gaming. So sad answer is no, but doesn't matter. We've got some really good CPUs out there at the moment that will definitely be able to satisfy your snap addiction. Hopefully that answers that question. And with that aside, I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.